So you've been deadlifting for a while. What we're gonna do with this video is go through some of the common issues we see a lot so we can make your deadlift even better. So the first thing we're gonna talk about is your foot positioning. So when I'm sitting up, I want the bar to be right over the balls of my feet. As far as stance, I'm gonna go with what's comfortable. So it could be hip width. I actually like to go a little bit wider than hip width when I'm deadlifting. Obviously for a sumo deadlift, I would go quite a bit wider than hip width, but I still keep the bar over the balls of my feet when I'm starting out. As far as footwear goes, you wanna have a really solid shoe. These shoes aren't that solid, so I'm actually gonna deadlift barefoot, okay? But if you have something like a Converse or a lifting shoe, that would help. The only thing with the lifting shoe is because the heels are usually raised with that, it may make your center of gravity go forward a little bit. So you just have to make sure you stay back. So, foot position, bars over the balls of my feet. Feet are about hip width. Okay, so the next thing we're gonna go over for one of the main things when we're actually lifting is making sure that our lats are on. So for that, the cue we use is you're trying to pinch a pencil in your armpits. So if I'm going down to lift a weight, my hands are just outside my hips, ready to lift. I'm going to focus on pinching that pencil in my armpits. So when I lift, I'm nice and solid, okay? And that kind of goes hand in hand with the next thing we're gonna talk about, which is pulling the slack out of the bar. So when I lift a weight, and what that would look like is if I start here and then I lift and I hear that kind of clicking sound when I'm lifting. So what I wanna do before I actually lift that weight up is get that slack out of the bar. So how I would do that, if I'm in the bottom, got my lats on, I'm actually gonna get that click out first. So I'm kind of feeling that weight. I'm feeling myself pushing in the ground before I lift, and then I come up, okay? So the next thing we see a lot is when people are lowering the weight, they tend to lower it and do a squat at the same time. So they'll look like this. So I'd go down with the weight and the bar would just kind of go against my legs. I'd scrape up my knees a little bit and then try to go down. And what that does, you actually put quite a bit of pressure on your lower back because you're trying to hold the weight out, it's way out in front of you. That's turning the hinge movement into a squat. So when we're talking about lowering that weight, we really want to focus on doing our hinge and the bar traveling straight down. So the bar is always in one line and we move around it. So how that would look like if I'm going to get the bar, so I'm here, got my lats on, get the slack out, up with it. Now I'm gonna hinge back. So I'm hinging back, and once it gets to my knees, I can lower it pretty quick. I can just kind of drop it. And that will help you avoid, one, a lot of stress on the lower back, two, scraping up the legs, and it also teaches you to stay in your hips and keep that weight back a little bit more instead of forward on your toes, okay? So the next thing we're gonna talk about that we see often is the hips popping up really quickly and over-reliance on your lower back. And with that, we wanna make sure, one of the big things with that is one, having strong glutes and strong abs to keep a good position as you're lifting, as well as good mobility to be able to get down in the starting position. So how that would look is if I'm here, the lift would look similar to that. So I go down here. So a lot of times with that, what's going on is we're starting in a bad position because we're not taking the time to set up in a good position, or two, we have poor mobility to get down that position, so we can't get down there. If you can't get down there, the main thing to do is just start a little bit higher and focus on your abdominal and glute strength until you can comfortably get in that lower position. However, if we do have good mobility enough to get down there, we're just gonna take a bit more time to set up in a better position and feel your glutes pushing before you start lifting. So how I would get rid of that would be, I start in a good position, I'm gonna exhale, get my abs on. And I'm always making the logo on my shirt. I'm allowing it to be seen the whole time. And when I'm lifting, I'm focusing on pushing that ground away from me. So I get that slack out of the bar, lats are engaged, and I'm pushing, really pushing that ground away from me. I'm not just letting my hips pop up. So I'm gonna push that ground away from me and finish my lift strong. I'll do my hinge, push that ground away, and come up. So a good way to think is just before I lift, is I wanna feel my legs pushing before I go. So what you would do with your grips. So I prefer a double overhand grip because I find it helps you stay more balanced. It is easier to do a bit more weight with an alternating grip. The one thing you just wanna make sure is that you switch grips often so that you can stay balanced from that standpoint. The other thing, it's easier to grip when you're lifting to hold the bar on this position of your hand. If you hold it up too high, it may pinch this part of your hand, but if you hold it right down there, you have a bit more mechanical advantage. And the bar is gonna wanna go down anyway, so we're just kind of putting it in the spot where it wants to go before we lift. It's kind of like a hook. And it gives you a bit more range of motion too, because if I'm trying to hold it in the middle of my palm, that's gonna be really hard on my grip. I'm gonna have to get a bit lower, whereas if I can kind of hang on those fingers a little bit more, I can stay a little bit higher when I'm lifting.
What about grip strength?
Grip strength, so if you notice that your hands are failing, your grip is failing a lot, the main thing to do is just do your best to, it could be you're gripping it too much. It could be it's right in the middle of your hands and you're trying to squeeze that bar too much. So if you let it slide down a little bit and let yourself hook the bar instead of trying to hold the bar, that may actually be a bit easier to hold the weight. The other thing too is you may just have to spend a bit more time doing your farmer carries or letting your grip strength catch up to the rest of your body.